Hello everyone, welcome to WORDCORE. Are you ready to talk all things words? My name is Carolina and today we'll explore the word silhouette. We'll look at it from the perspective of fashion, Renaissance painting, art, and more. Stay tuned and let's learn some new things together. Silhouette was not the initial title for this episode. I was actually going to title it something else. But then that something else is a two-worded term and I thought, okay, I cannot break my own rules in the fourth episode. That is a little too early because the concept of this podcast is to use a single worded title for each episode. So I thought I'd come up with a word that would incorporate that thing I wanted to talk about and will talk about later in the episode. I would think of a word that would let me essentially talk about that one little thing. And that word came to be silhouette. This is the first time I'm recording it in my new apartment I've been in for, actually I won't tell you how long because that will expose me and tell you how long I haven't been recording, but it's a great place in the same neighborhood I lived in for the past few years, so I'm really glad about that. And I'm currently facing a window, and behind the window there's just a wall of trees, which is an incredible view to have. So let's go on with the episode. Starting off with the usual, the Oxford Dictionary definition of the word silhouette. Silhouette is an outline image in a single flat color against a plain background, giving the appearance of a shadow cast by a said figure. That describes profile portraits specifically, which were painted or cut out from paper around 1750s until about 1900s, when photography replaced the art of creating silhouettes. Silhouettes were an inexpensive and the main way for the common people of the Victorian era to have their portraits made. The colors required no detailing, therefore the process was relatively easy. Compared to photography, which at that point until near 1900s was still a complicated practice that only was accessible for the richest and wealthiest of the society. I'm going to post some pictures of these silhouettes on my Instagram, but I'm sure you know what I mean when I read the definition. When I read it, I immediately have this association from movies and like drama series of these silhouettes in a necklace lockets, which, you know, is just super romantic. And I'm actually thinking of making one of myself just for fun. Nowadays, it's probably a very simple process to make it. As far as the word origin goes, it was named after Etienne de Silhouette, a French finance minister under Louis XV. And there are many theories as to why the word has its origins in his last name, but none of them are actually certain. I found though that apparently cutting out the paper portraits was his hobby, so that might be the reason. I figured, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, thinking that Coco Chanel would be the perfect figure to talk about in an episode on the word silhouette. Therefore, we will stay in the period between the 19th and the 20th century for a little while longer to talk more about none other than Gabrielle Chanel. What first made me think of her as a topic for an episode on the word silhouette was her enigmatic aura. With all that she's achieved in her life, I think it is safe to say that she's reformed the silhouettes of women in fashion and therefore in everyday life. It all started when she began experimenting herself by wearing men's clothing like breechers and tight-fitting jackets. She discarded the fashion of the courtesans at the time. By enriching the masculine styles with feminine features, she brought a new silhouette to life. And there's this one iconic series of photographs of Chanel and her lover and muse, Boy Capel. In the photographs, Coco is seen wearing high-waisted suit trousers, which to us today is probably just a great outfit, but it was unthinkable back then in her times for a woman to wear trousers like that in an outfit like that. It was just not something that was done. It was not part of the current trends in fashion. That, however, had its consequences. Women longed to have Coco's figure and they got accustomed to new dieting rules to obtain it. Chanel freed women from the tight-fitting corsets by dressing them in looser styles, but at the same time made them more preoccupied with their appearance and silhouettes. But isn't that the side effect of fashion till this day? Chanel explained it by saying that previously clothes were made for idle women. Her clients, however, were constantly busy. With her fluid, androgynous designs, she encouraged women to live and move freely and naturally. That was her take on female emancipation. Chanel once said, "Nothing is more beautiful than freedom of the body," and I think she really tried to capture that in her designs, and she really wanted women to feel free to experience life and move however they longed to and couldn't before because of the very obstructing clothes they wore on the daily. Apparently, she never sketched her designs on paper. Lilou Grumba-Macron, Coco's former assistant, said her favorite part about working for Chanel was handing her the pins. And that was the most exciting moment when she could see Gabrielle almost sculpt the fabric on a model, create the silhouettes in real time with her own hands with the use of pins, which she did almost like a sculptor would, but with fabrics instead of other materials. Jean Cocteau, a French poet and playwright and Coco Chanel's dear friend, in his famous pencil drawing of her, which currently is on sale, titled "Women Without Face and Without Past," drew her with a blank face, which is a great reference to the flat collar silhouettes I talked about earlier. He made sure to keep all the details of her dress as well as her emblematic pearls reflected, but for some reason her face is left blank. Why could that be? Chanel was known to be mysterious, always concealing something about her. Whether it was the details of her past or present, she never exposed herself fully. "She never exposed herself fully" is a sentence that could also be said about the beautiful Venus in the center of one of his most iconic works. The Florentine Renaissance painter Sandro Botticelli is another example of an enigmatic genius. Coming from a poor family, just like Chanel, both of them, regardless of their humble beginnings, have made their ways up thanks to their talents and hard work and ended up in some most elite cultural circles. Botticelli spent almost all his life working for the renowned Medici family. As a remarkable portraitist, he famously rejected the classic Renaissance portrait profile and introduced the three-quarters frontal pose. The object was portrayed almost fully frontal, looking at the spectator. An example here would be the portrait of Smeralda Bandinelli from circa 1472, currently at display in the Victoria and Albert Museum, and it is the first portrait of a woman looking directly at the spectator. The composition of this painting is remarkable. You can see her right hand rested on the frame, making it look as if she's capable of exiting it. Interestingly, it is often assumed that it was Leonardo da Vinci who painted the first frontal portrait of a woman, with the portrait of Ginevra de' Benci from 1474, but as we know, he was not in fact the first one to do that. And if you're wondering why this is such a big deal, let me give you some context. Before Botticelli's Smeralda Bandinelli portrait, women were expected to be painted humbly. Their reflections should not be facing or looking at the spectator. That's why they were often portrayed looking down. Thanks to the shift of perspective introduced by Botticelli, women became more present and widely represented with their reflections visible beyond the frame. As you'll get to see, being ahead of their time and breaking the conventions is a common theme in Botticelli's and Chanel's life. Moving forward to the 1480s and the unveiling of the revolutionary Birth of Venus, commissioned by the Medici family. One of the reasons making it unique is the surface it was painted on, canvas versus wood like it was done in the past. And interestingly, two pieces of canvas were sewn together before the painting process began to achieve a surface big enough. For those interested, it is currently displayed at the Uffizi Gallery in Florence. Hesiod was an ancient Greek poet known for his poem Theogony, describing the birth stories of Greek gods including Venus. According to Hesiod's legend, Botticelli's painting depicts the divine Venus as she is approaching the land in a shell, so contradictory to the title which suggests the actual moment of birth. Apparently, this title was only given to the painting in the late 19th century. The shell Venus stands on is exaggerated in its size, and it symbolizes fertility. I think it is done in such a beautiful and subtle way. I am personally not a huge fan of exposing what's most intimate to a person, so spectacular is how I would describe this reference to female genitalia, which in this painting is covered in this classical glorious pose. Next to it being painted on canvas, another groundbreaking side to this work of art is Venus's nudity. This was the first secular painting since antiquity to incorporate nudity in a frontal pose. Botticelli's Venus was the pioneering female nude, depicting the perfection of a human body instead of its destruction. It was an ode to beauty and love. I just love how revealing yet concealing Venus in this painting is. While being completely nude, I see some modesty in her effortlessly and gently covering her body with her long golden hair blown by the winds of Zephyrus. I perceive this painting as very light and bright and breezy. Maybe it's because of, the surroundings and the pastel colors, but I just really love how light it feels and how it's focused on depicting the beauty of a female body with all the symbolism around it. Her body is seducing and provoking in its natural state, but her face is confident and calm. She knows what's hidden underneath the palms of her hands. She realizes how beautiful and powerful it is. All of Botticelli's women are examples of ephemeral, perfect beauty. Grace, purity, and finesse, the virtues of Venus pudica. Translated from Latin, pudica means modest. Venus pudica is a term used to describe a classical pose, or silhouette if you will, often used in art. As you might have guessed, it illustrates a nude woman, either standing or reclining, who's placed one hand over her private parts to cover them. She often has her other hand covering her breasts. Positioning Venus's hands this way purposefully brings the spectator's gaze to the hidden areas, the forbidden land. So actually, Venus is not as modest as the name would imply. On contrary, it amplifies her sexuality and emphasizes her divine domains, beauty and fertility. The pudica pose, mainly used in sculptures, is a way of returning the power and the ownership of her sexuality back to Venus, her silhouette, and her hands. Inspired by the modesty and undeniable confidence of the beautiful silhouette of Venus pudica, obsessed with dark wood, dimmed lights, and blossoming in front of the right person, I once wrote a very short poem titled precisely Venus pudica. So just like in other episodes, I will end the episode on silhouette with a short poem, and I'll let it be the prelude to the next episode of the podcast. Till then, here's Venus pudica. From Venus pudica to an open book. On your wooden desk, ready for you to read me.